And first, I should thank Department of Physics, Anandana ma'am, and everybody for inviting me for this talk. It's a big honor for me to get invited for such a prestigious series. I'm following the series, and very big eminent scientist also has presented here. So I hope I will justify whatever I have done. I will try to present and hope I add up in your knowledge about space weather and make you more curious. That is my only aim I have at present. So, can I share the screen? Okay.
Yes, you have to share the screen. Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Yeah. So I will start with some memories from department because they are unforgettable and I will never forget them definitely because so many nice memories. When I was making the talk, I was more it is realizing, oh, really it was wonderful time. So when I enter in 2009, so I finished my graduation undergraduate from St. Xavier's College and came here to do MSc. Especially, I wanted to do astronomy and space science because since long time I was interested in that. So when I made, I think first pressure, so during admission, and he said, "Okay, Ankush, but we don't know whether we are going to run this course this year, but we are going to take admissions. So do you want to take that risk?" And I said, yes, because I want to do astronomy. I want to definitely I will take admission and we'll see if something doesn't work out or I have to change the topic. But definitely I'm going to take admission. And I think that was a good decision because astronomy course was running that time. And I think Radha ma'am was there in charge. She was made the in charge and she handled very nicely. She set up even lab, astronomy lab. We could do a lot of activities. Plus, we could conduct our experiments in IUCAM. And she gave a lot of freedom also. So that was advantageous. So we could do more than our regular physics course, other activities too. I remember specifically I want to mention before I go ahead, like two professors we are really enjoy the discussion. One is Professor Rangwala. So whenever he used to teach us quantum, me and especially I think Avdhut, my one of the friend, we used to always curious about this basic physics, and we will be always discussing with him. And we don't understand quantum mechanics. Even I don't understand now. Even that time I never understood properly. So we used to have like after lecture 1 hour discussion, and he patiently used to try to answer the questions, and we really enjoyed that. Same stuff I remember with Anuradha ma'am when we used to finish the course and she used to go to canteen to just fetch a cup of tea. We used to follow her and we used to just trouble her with some questions and whatever we didn't understand. And even she has helped us to understand the subject very nicely. So these two professors, as a regular classwork, they have influenced me a lot. And definitely for others also, we are fortunate to have them. Even Professor Chitre, who taught us magnetohydrodynamics, I'll never forget what he taught us. Beautiful, like 3 4 hours continuous lecture. I never felt his lecture is getting too much or boring. So even he has influenced a lot on my understanding and passion for doing space science or astronomy in my this PhD or later on. And one more person which I should not forget is Professor Patwardhan. Uh, from St. Xavier's, he has been teaching me. Even if he was in department, he used to stat make, and I remember many hours discussion in a canteen sometime or sometime on in bus stop. So we're just discussing about various topics of physics, StatMech or something. So definitely that environment which provided department is marvelous. I feel we don't see that's very common everywhere, and I thanks for department for everything they have provided us. So there are a lot of other many people have influence. I may not able to name everybody, but I think some once I go ahead, maybe they will be mentioned somewhere whoever has influenced me a lot and helped me to learn things in better way. So once in 2009 there was an eclipse. So in China. This was total solar eclipse, but it was in June, as I remember, July. Yeah, so that was monsoon time in India. So we decided to do. Okay, we cannot do from India any scientific experiment, and we had this experiment plan that was being planned for 1 year with Jatin Rathod from Planetarium and other members, Chintamani. We have around 10, 12 people in the team from various backgrounds. So we got guidance from PRL, NM Ashok, Jagdev Singh for this experiment, and we even got few things which we could get from them and send this interrogator. So we went to China during this my first year of MSc, right? When I joined, yeah, during that. So this was like very big expedition and very high risk expedition as because it's optical instrument we need, and we don't want clouds. So we went to the best site of Wuhan, which was supposed to be cloud free, but unfortunately just during the eclipse a big cloud came and whole experiment was like, okay, we couldn't take any measurement that time. Actually we lost all the measurement. So that was very big setback that has affected us a lot because we prepared and all, and it was like negative, you get negative impact of that. So I was in not good situation that time, but okay, we should move on. And that's what we decided. We carried out with our own regular classes and other activities and kept us busy, and we adventure also to doing some other out of the stuff. Even we fail, okay, we learn something. That was the motivation even I had that time. So all of the things what I have done, I should tell, they are not individual. So it's not like Ankush has done this or something. It's a whole teamwork, and I always like to work in teams because that's more fun. And all the team expertise when come together, we can do big stuff. I believe on that. So even this was the one MSc project. We had to do MSc project. So I started with this. Okay, we had a gamma ray detector there, and we just discussed, oh, this do this gamma ray detect cosmic rays or not? So just curiosity we had, and not much background we had that time about space and all stuff. And we said, oh, why don't we try it? So I remember we 2 nights or 3 nights we were means 24 hour running this experiment in a rotation basis in a lab. At the night time also two of us were sitting and continuously recording this measurement after a few minute or 5 minute interval something. Exactly, I don't recall now, but looks and we had two independent two giga counters like this because we want to see whether really we are seeing something or not. It's a noise. So we planned according to that, and we measure the some radiation count, I will say that time, and we try to relate whether they are related to some neutron monitor which is in Moscow and all. We try to do this. Okay, some reasonable correlation we found, uh, but yeah, it's expected because global there is a like cosmic rays. There is a globally they are present everywhere. Just energy varies, but some long-term variation could be similar. So that's how we started with space science, I will say, in university activities. And then I moved on to next stuff, which is one of the most memorable event up to now for me. So this is a annular eclipse expedition. So in 2010, after setback from 2009 eclipse, I was like, okay, should we do something more experiments or not? I was not very much confident. But I remember Chintamani, he said, no, Ankush, we should do something. And I said, okay, yeah, let's do. Once again, we should try. And that's how we came up with some concept, like we were already doing with GM counter. Then we said, okay, this GM counter or cosmic rays get affected with atmospheric also changes, and can we do something cosmic ray measurements or gamma ray measurements, something atmospheric radiation, I will say, during this eclipse. And we came up with this experiment, and first we needed like not GM counter. We thought we should do better this time. GM counter just give counts, and we came up with a sodium iodide detector we should have. Even Raghav sir was new faculty there, Chetan sir was new that time, Nitin sir was there. So this we discussed with them also, and they gave a lot of inputs to this. Okay, and we zero down with sodium iodide detector. We are not aware much instrumentation definitely, Without them, we could not have done it. They help us, but we didn't had any detector. Big only one detector we had in this UDP, and like we wanted to have two detectors separate, so we get like redundancy, or also we can validate whether results are there present or not. So then we are searching everywhere. Then Radha ma'am help us a lot in that to network the people. We went to TFR, but we couldn't get big luck there. Then we went to CBS and met Chitre sir and Narsale sir, sorry, Nagarjan sir and Patel sir. And these guys were very enthusiastic and they supported us. Oh yeah, you are doing something interesting. We will do help you, and they help us complete an experiment, like providing the instrumentation setup, even providing the financial support for us to conduct this stuff. So that was like marvelous. We were not expecting this will happen. So I remember we carried almost few hundred kg lead bricks. So you may be okay. Oops, looks like I missed that. So we carried the few hundred kg lead bricks from Mumbai to Chennai, and from Chennai we transported by vehicle to the Rameshwaram, because Rameshwaram has a maximum annularity, and so we wanted to have maximum time and maximum effect. So we decided to go there, and we had around team, which you can see in a photo we have here. All most of them are my batchmates. Uh, Chintamani, Padmanabh, and Abhishek, Aniruddha. I think he's also there. Avdut, Vishal, Virendra. So most of them are also doing. Some of them are PhD doing, and some are finished. Then Himlata ma'am, she's also helped a lot that time. She was eager to learn or something she was not knowing, so we used to have a discussions. So that helped us to carry out this experiment and come at that time come up with some measurements. Definitely, whatever conditions we had, very short time, within a 1 month, I think we did everything. Pre-testing at university, terrace sometime, and some testing done in CBS, and then after we went to Eclipse, we means we didn't sleep many nights. I will say that few nights we didn't sleep because we didn't had automation. So we are doing recording like manually and writing down, because we didn't have much time to do that. We could have done, but we are manually doing. So by rotation wise, to two people for two counters, we are measuring. So it was very hectic, but it was awesome, I will say. And Chetan sir that time also helped a lot. I think generator, we had a generator arrangement if current goes, and that happened. Current was not there, and he was the person who fixed it, and we somehow got the reading. So we learned a lot. We interacted from this experiment, and still a lot of memories are fresh. And I'm sure everybody in team will not forget. Whoever is in the team, they will never forget this expedition. So I should thank very for this support from Professor Chitre. He's no more unfortunately, Patel sir also. So all these guys always were there, and without their motivation and support, we could not have done this. So that's what the product, like we analyze the data, whatever we got, and we published first publication of that. And whoever contributed, you can see they are here. So whole teamwork, it's like this. He's there. I was there, just instrumental person who is like trying to drive something, but everybody has contributed significantly, and without that, we could not have come up with even this publication, I will say. So that continues as an association with the department as I went ahead. Even 2018, so this is just recently, which is just 2 years back or something you can say. So I have still continued when we are doing PhD. We had a continuous research collaboration with Raghav sir, some students, and we used to meet at department. Sometime I remember some understanding we are looking at eclipse effect on secondary cosmic rays, and we are not getting what's happening, and we couldn't sleep whole night. And like 4 5 people, even Vaibhav was there, right? Vaibhav, Chintamani, Virendra. Uh, I miss somebody, I maybe another guys, and we are like whole night awake and just thinking what is happening, why we are seeing these observations. So that was like fantastic, something we want to understand, and everybody, like whole team was eager to understand that. So that's a very different experience one gets. Then we have this lunar eclipse expedition, which we planned just recently. So we wanted to study lunar eclipse, and we had some scientific objectives. So we had a spectrometer, polarimeter with us that time. Here also we went from Mumbai. So I fly from US to India. I reached morning, I think 4 a.m. Then we have a next flight at 9 a.m. like that. So I just dumped everything and took few things with me, and I met everybody at the airport, and we went to Jaipur. And this was also fantastic experience, though once again cloud were not cooperating with us. We had a hazy clouds and not that great measurements we could conduct, but yeah, the attempt we gave was like fabulous, I will say. So whole team was like important. Siddharth sir was there. Yeah, many memories. I no time, I think I can't go to each memory here. So anyway, so then I have worked even with at WRIC. Once again, whole team worked at WRIC. Like 4 or 5 of us always like enthusiasts to do something and contribute. So we organize a lot of activities with WRIC and department. With department, we had like night sky observation. We I think many years this 12-inch telescope was just residing. We got it out. We did observations, and we tried to conduct some experiments also in a long term, not that time, but later also. Then same with WRIC, we fabricated the whole spectrometer because we wanted to do spectrum of meteors that time. So that was some interest. We had a meteor observations. So and we did successfully, and actually we even got one spectrum of meteor. Luckily, even that was crude way we did it, but means very less probability we could get a meteor spectrum. We somehow we got because Gemini meteor shower was very high in frequency that time. Maybe that's why. And then WRIC, we had like these two workshops also we conducted, organized completely from getting the speakers. So some Asian Indian astronomy, that was very interesting topic. We are curious. So, and it's instrumentation. So WRIC had some role. So we organized there. Then there was a Venus transit. So this also workshop we organized. Many people participated and learned a lot of things definitely. And one more workshop I think a for astronomy. So three workshop I think we did here during that. So that's how it went on with a lot of interaction with CBS, WRIC, Ayuka. We had some experiments, and then some summer projects I could do it via NCRA TIFR, and then I moved to IIG. Yeah. So that's what the background I have from the department, what I have. And definitely I might have missed many names. I'm sorry for that. I think it's a lot of things. I have too many memories to talk, and every person has something I can talk. It is like a 1 hour talk, or will be less to just talk about university memory. So I just highlighted few moments which I still cherish and will keep cherishing. So I thanks the department and everyone who contributed in those moments. So I think I will go ahead with my talk from here. Or anybody has some comments are welcome. If anyone want to say something.
Take the comments at the end.
Okay, so I will try to be quick with the talk because I think I have too many slides. So let's have a scenario. Suddenly there is a power cut. Massive blackout hits the earth. We have a global, once again animation not. So this is supposed to be animation, but looks like some problem. But anyway, so massive blackout hits the earth, and the whole, all the lights, my maximum light cover, electricity grid goes down, and you have a complete darkness in cities, in many mainly highlighted countries, and millions of people are in darkness now without electricity. Not only that, what happens next? There is a complete disruption of communication between satellite grid, ground, flights, ships. Suddenly, there is no communication. Suddenly, that those are disturbed or got noisy. We don't know what happened. Everybody is shocked. Not only Mumbai, all over the globe. Many people are just wondering what went wrong. We don't have any communication. Our phone is not okay. Some signal and problem issues. Next, we have reports coming all over the globe. Oh, there are many auroras seen. And we just head out of Mumbai, like out your house, because there is no electricity, as Mumbaikar does. There is no electricity, no current, no fan. It's hot. Let's go outside and get fresh air. And we start seeing strange, colorful lights in the sky appearing, which we never saw. At least our generation never saw that. And what are those weird ghosty lights? Everybody is amazed, not only in India, bro, something has gone wrong. So what is that? Is that some terrorist attack or some war has happened? Or what is that? Nothing else. It's simple sun. Sun has caused this massive disruption in our power grid, communication, and this for some people beautiful auroras or some ghostly auroras because who are not seen they may get scared of. Okay, so this is what sun can do with us, and this is not like a science fiction movie. This scenario is highly realistic when we don't know, but it can happen if sun gets very angry on us and cause a huge solar storm which he can send to the earth and disturb the whole present space technology. So I'm going to talk about the sun and how it's going to affect our space environment or geospace environment. And should we really worry? I think that point I already conveyed. Definitely, we have to worry because sun is going to cause this sometime in future, and we should be prepared for that. So I'm going to give a basic introduction about this field, space weather. So that's what I put the title, Exploring the Dynamic Space Weather, because I'm still exploring it and there are so many unknown stuff. Even I know a little bit about it and trying to learn each moment. So let's start with this talk. And I will start with this a beautiful picture. I will say it's a historic or iconic picture for the space. So this is a picture. They are holding this, the three scientists from center is a Van Allen. He's a famous person in space science. So Van Allen radiation bed, Van Allen probes named after him. So this is they are holding the Explorer One rocket, which was having a cosmic ray detector on the top, the first science space science instrument which they sent to the space. So this is a historic 1958 this was done, and they measure the radiation, cosmic radiation in the space. So strangely what happened, like they found a very low current in the detector at a certain very high heights, and Van Allen then got shocked. Oh, okay, what is this? Do we have a very low radiation in the space? No, he realized this is not the case, there is something wrong. And he interpreted the results. No, actually, our instruments got saturated. Means there is a huge radiation dose to the spacecraft or the detector that time. And that's why they couldn't measure particles. The particle flux was very high. Means we have at some altitude, few thousand kilometers from the Earth, high radiation environment present. And that is how they discovered Earth's radiation belt. So this was the discovery of Earth's radiation belt, and I will say in situ measurements in the space. First in situ measurement on the space done by this. So these belts are named after the Van Allen, the person who discovered them and studied also extensively later on with many measurements. Later on, one of the biggest milestone in space history happened um, in 1958 once again, and that's by Parker, Jim Parker. So there are many events in space science I will be missing, so I'm not going to give everything here. But anyway, this is what I feel very important and significant. So Parker proposed that there is a continuous emission of charged particles from the sun every minute. Sun is emitting continuous stream of charged particles to the earth, and he named them as solar wind, and they are not very small. They are high speed winds, I will say, and around few hundred kilometer per second or supersonic, you can say they were found. So this Parker submitted this paper to APJ in 1958, postulating sun does not only emit your electromagnetic radiation, but also it emits the particles. But it was rejected by both the referees. But editor that time was S. Chandrasekhar. He realized the importance of his discovery, and then it was accepted. And this he is still alive, Parker, and he's the only person or scientist who, on his name the spacecraft is named when he's alive. So there's a Parker Solar Probe which is exploring the sun, or one of the first measurements of the closest measurements of the sun the Parker Solar Probe is doing. So that's a big honor for his discovery. So the solar wind now, once there exist in the space, then its consequences should be tremendous because they can hit the earth and cause a lot of activities. So let's understand some simple basic stuff about solar wind. So this is extremely hot gas, I will say. So maybe million-degree cell temperature, but don't assume it's very hot if you put hand, because it's a very rare, or very density is very low, just few particle per cc. Means it's almost perfect vacuum on the earth. So only few particle per cc exists in the band space. And the temperature is 10 to 6 Kelvin, speed around, as I said, 500 on an average kilometer per second. It varies, few hundred plus minus, or even some transient events can go few thousand kilometer, that we'll see. And the magnetic field. Now this is what one Manchanda sir mentioned. Okay, there is a magnetic field also in the space. So where it comes from, the sun, the source is everything, energy, most of the energy is sun. So there is a magnetic field in this solar wind. It's like embedded in the solar wind, and solar wind carries this magnetic field from the surface of the sun or from the corona to the earth. And even this is very, very small, 5 nanotesla, just very small magnitude. Nanotesla means very small magnitude. But this has a tremendous consequences to the Earth's environment. So let's see this solar wind, how this looks in the space. So this is actually real photo picture of the solar wind. Can you see this white thing? So this is a continuous stream of charged particles. Once again, animation now running, sorry for that. So it's emitting like that. So this is continuously done by the sun. So what happens? Sun is not stationary. So sun is also rotating around 27 days period, you can say approximately. It's not rigid body, but okay, it varies speed from pole to equator. But 27-day rotation period approximately, it rotates around the axis. And when it is rotate, it's like you fountain effect, like if rotating fountain, you will see spiral arms of water arms. So similarly, it is happening with the sun. This when the fluid packet or a charged particle packet is thrown from the surface, that follows this trajectory, spiral trajectory. And this is a huge structure, okay? So you can see it expands to the whole solar system almost, and it just goes on spiraling and spiraling. So this is called heliospheric current sheet it generates due to these charged particles going around the sun in an Archimedean spiral shape. So it's a very complicated structure, and even it has impact on the Earth's environment. This complex structure also forms, like if you look at it closely, like some boundaries, like there is a solar wind which is fast, and sometimes solar wind which is a slow solar wind. Okay, so look at this cartoon here. We have a high-speed solar wind which is shown in the blue, and you have an ambient solar wind or slow solar wind, I will call. So when it hits to the, when high-speed solar wind hits to the ambient slow solar wind, it compresses the magnetic field which is carrying radially outward, and it forms this base compressed solar wind region or magnetic field region or turbulent magnetic field region, and this keeps rotating with the sun. You may see few months same structure this appearing and going if you are observing at same point in the space. So these are called co-rotating interaction region. They're happening because of, like, solar wind is not like solar wind speed is not homogeneous. It it changes. Some patches are fast, some are slow because of magnetic field structures and the source which they originate because of that. And this compressed region, turbulent region, if they hit the Earth or any other planets, they can cause a lot of havocs. Okay. So these are very important structures to study. So this right panel is shows the simulation of a solar wind and CME also. Uh, and you can see these are the like once again spiral type structure of solar wind, and color code indicates the speed. So it goes 200 to 1600 scale, but we don't have that high. So let's say around like 200 is a blue and red or a green, you can say around 500. So speed varies very drastically, slow to high solar wind, and they co-rotate, and sometimes they hit the planet, and planet interacts with this compressed and turbulent region to give rise to some disturbances in its atmosphere or environment. So this solar wind is very crucial as we go ahead to understand, because it changes not only day to day, but with solar activity. So what is solar activity? The sun is always, we feel, okay, I see the sunrise and sunset, plain days almost. What is there? Some solar activity. The sun is very dynamic. It has a lot of flares like prominences, eruptions, sunspots, um, high intensity region, like that we have happening on the surface, and that's why it's always active. And if you take approximate to quantify this activity, let's assume you just count the number of dark spots which are visible on the sun generally, and plot them with year, and you will see like that number of spots, they from low to they go high, and they decrease, and they follow around 11-year cycle. So that is a famous 11-year solar cycle. We do see that, and activity increases, higher the number of spots means more activity. And look at this solar wind plot. What happens with solar wind then if solar activity changes? So when you see a low solar activity, sun has a very nice dipole magnetic field because it's a huge magnet, like Earth is a huge magnet. So sun is also a huge bar magnet, and you can see it's a whole dipole magnetic field. And when it is like that, we have a nice high speed solar winds located in north and south poles, and low solar wind at the equatorial regions. Whereas when activity increases, you have a lot of sunspots, lot of chaos happening on the surface, and magnetic fields are twisting, jumping here and there, and the whole solar wind you will see almost same, like speed is always almost uniform. There, it doesn't have a low and high structure with the latitude. You will see almost similar solar wind everywhere, the velocities. So this is how the solar wind get modulated by solar activity. So solar activity plays a very big role in determining the solar wind speed, density, magnetic field it carries to the Earth. So these are one of the famous. Oh, one second. So this is a solar flare. This is supposed to be flare here, emission, nice emission. So what are these? Sun is not only emitting a visible light, some it emits X-rays. Sometimes even gamma rays can be emitted from the sun in a big events. But let's have like X-rays. It emits even high energetic X-rays, and those we can see by monitors which are in the space, located on the GOES spacecraft around 36,000 kilometers from the surface. So sun, this causes many solar flares daily you will see, but they are very small, so we don't see any impact, much impact on the Earth's ionosphere or atmosphere. So there are some big events, X-class solar flare, which we call. They are very huge. So this energy of solar flare or sudden emission of electromagnetic radiation from the sun could be equivalent of like 10 raised to 32 Earths, and that is equivalent around 10 million times than the volcanic explosion. Like one volcano, you have 10 million volcanoes simultaneously just erupting. Just think of that energy, and that energy is getting emitted by the sun in just few moments, and this is happening all over the surface many times. So that's energy scale we are looking at from the sun. Not only this, Then we have a huge like solar particle events. Those are called SCPs or solar energetic particles like that. Even people call so SCPs we call them. So what are those? Like we have electromagnetic radiation. Sometimes they accompany the solar flare, and you will see in a few minute time delay sudden enhancement, 1,000 times or something or plus more in the MEV particle range, MEV or GeV particles at the Earth. So you can see this is the corona graph, and white circle is the sun, and sun is occulted by these rays, and you see the corona, whitish corona around the sun, and this is the whole interplanetary space. Look at these white streaks. What are those? That is not a noise actually. Those are actually solar energetic particles hitting the CCD, and they are causing this saturation of CCD and traces you see on that is CCD. So these are actually particles coming from the sun, and they're very harmful for the spacecraft if their intensity increases beyond some threshold. So these are also controlled by somehow magnetic field of the sun, because these SCPs also occur many times and around the sun. But we suppose we are facing the sun and backside of the sun something happening, we don't need too much worry because they may not hit the earth. Sometimes it could, but mostly it doesn't hit the earth. uh, but even some events happening on the visible side of the sun may miss the earth or may hit the earth. So that is controlled by the interplanetary magnetic field. This is a magnetic field of the sun which is completely dominating the whole solar system, you can say, in a spiral structure. So suppose some SCP happens and these magnetic fields are connected at the earth. This is earth sitting here, and there is a huge eruption, and some particles are ejected, solar energy particles are ejected, and earth is at a right place on this magnetic line, or I will say this is a highway, like for the particles. If this road is there or these magnetic field lines are there and rightly connected to the earth, we do see some particles reaching there and causing sudden enhancements in particle fluxes. And those are, like you can see, from orders of magnitude, it goes high. For tens or hundreds of ME particles, they go up and disturb the Earth's environment. So after the SCP, we have a CMEs. So these are some transient events of the sun which could really affect us. And you can have a look at this nice picture from of the sun. Look at this ribbon type structure going, like we call this flux tube or prominence type structure we call. So how the shape it comes, as I told you earlier, sun is a huge bar magnet, and magnetic fields are, don't assume it's like perfect dipole magnet and sitting and idle nothing doing, because sun is hot, gas is there which is moving, and magnetic field are tied with this hot plasma. That plasma makes it move, these magnetic field lines, and twist, turn, and that causes this even shape. So this whole plasma is going along the flux tube of magnetic field lines and forming these R-type structures. Sometimes they erupt and fall back to the sun sometime, and sometimes they can get ejected from the sun and travel in the interplanetary space and reach to the earth. So here is one eruption, you can see here is a structure. So those are we call coronal mass ejections, CMEs. So these are a huge structure coming from the sun. Trillions of, I think, kg mass is ejected from the sun. So how they look actually, this is a cartoon showing how the CME looks like. This is the sun sitting here. Look at this, it looks like a bubble. You can take a balloon and just blow it. And it's like a balloon type of structure from the sun. And it is not small. The sun is around just 7 or 8 lakh kilometer radius. But look at the scale of this structure. Those are astronomical. 1 AU, around 15 crore kilometer size. So these are huge structure in the interplanetary space, and they have a spiraling like magnetic field lines. Then you have a shock because there is high speed CMEs are coming. And speed can reach around 3,000 kilometer per second, even though rare, but at least around few hundreds to 1,000 kilometers CMEs are very frequent during solar cycles when it is maximum. And you do see this is a few thousand kilometer per second, not hour. So that's a tremendous speed. it just takes CME can reach within 24 hours to the Earth and cause massive disruption. So we have a just lead time of 24 hours sometime before we do something to safeguard us from such big events from the sun. So we call them solar storms or coronal mass ejections, like that structures. And the mass it has a very huge. Look at the scale. I will just get an analogy. So 1 cm is a huge cm. If I integrate or somehow I have a weighing machine, which I don't, and try to weigh the whole cme, I'll see the mass is almost 250 million elephants, equivalent of that. We don't have that much population on the earth itself. So this is a more heavier than population on the of elephants on the earth at present. So they are very massive structures traveling in the interplanetary space. So this is okay, nice. This is working finally animation. So this is a very nice animation, favorite animation for space scientists. Most of the talks you will see because this is very nicely done. Look at this, sun has emitted the plasma. These particles are traveling into interplanetary space, but somehow there is some magnetic field structure around the Earth, and that's why they don't directly hit the Earth, but they go along the magnetic field line and okay, I will rerun this. It's a nice animation. So this plasma travels interplanetary space few days, sometime it takes or within 24 hours and reach the Earth. But the Earth has a dipole magnet, like cometary type magnetosphere at present, and it try to shield us from direct impact, but somehow they make the way to enter in the Earth's magnetosphere, and they go to the polar region. Look at these colorful lights, and they show a nice display at the polar region, and those are known as auroras, auroral regions, I will say, not exact polar, auroral regions. So these colorful lights are called auroras. We do see at north and south both hemispheres in a high latitude regions. So these auroras are nothing but charged particles entering from the sun and interacting with Earth's atmosphere, mainly oxygen and nitrogen molecules, and exciting them. And when they do de-excite, they emit various colors like green, red. So we do see various colors of auroras around these rural regions, specifically high latitude countries. And it's not common at low latitude countries like India. That's good also maybe, but it's not like that we will never see. There is a chance we may see that also. So how these auroras, as I said, this is a simplistic picture, how the colorful lights come from the aurora. Um, and I should say this is a amazing manifestation, how the solar wind interacts with the earth. This is a direct evidence, like auroras, shows like that, how solar wind particles can really affect Earth's environment. So those are the solar wind particles entering in the Earth's atmosphere and causing these beautiful displays. So let us move on around magnetosphere, Earth's magnetosphere, because this is what we saw earlier. Something was protecting us from this solar wind or huge events. So this is our shield actually from the sun. Sun even is a cause for the life on the earth. Even it can disrupt us, our life, regular life at present. So look at this cartoon, very simple cartoon. We have a solar wind and there is some cometary type of magnetic field. So Earth is like a dipole magnet, but it is not symmetry because of high speed solar wind hitting the magnetosphere from the date side and causing like cometary structure, tail like structure of this magnetic field in the night side. You can look at here. So you have a magnetopause where the solar wind pressure and magnetic pressure of solar wind pressure, which is a dynamic pressure, is balanced by the magnetic pressure of the earth. And this is a boundary we define magnetopause, after which we have a Earth's magnetosphere inside. And there are like radiation belts sitting inside the magnetosphere, which is high energetic particles. We'll have a look at it slightly more details ahead. And some plasma can enter from the pole also, but most of the plasma enter from the night side, and that's a famous process known as the Earth, which we call reconnection. Through reconnection, it happens. So this is one of the major discoveries in the space science once again, like what causes how the solar wind enters the Earth's environment. That was puzzling. Initially, people thought, okay, some solar wind has a viscous interaction because solar wind we can treat as a fluid and magnetosphere surface, they are interacting, and through the viscous interaction, it is transferring some fraction of solar wind energy to the magnetic field, and we have some auroras or some disturbances in the magnetic field of the earth. So that was the initial belief in early this 1900 or somewhere nearby. But with time we realized, okay, that can just account for 10 to 20% of the energy budget of the magnetosphere. If you calculate the energy, how much we see in the magnetosphere. So something was big stuff was missing where the 80% energy was coming. And there was then breakthrough. There is a reconnection. So what is the reconnection? So reconnection, I will try to explain first and then go to the earth. So look at these magnetic field lines. So they are pointing upward in this bottom figure, and there are some magnetic field lines pointing downward. And somehow you get them together, push them together. Suppose they are in the solar wind, and you try to push solar magnetic fields together in opposite direction, very close to each other. One point will come, okay, this is the point. So what is the polar magnetic field direction? We don't know. We cannot have two direction at one point for magnetic fields, right? So something should happen there. And what happens? There is taking place a reconfiguration of magnetic field topology. The magnetic field lines reconfigure themselves, and that's how they reconnect and form like this magnetic field lines here and here, and get ejected in upward and downward direction from this region. And this process is called magnetic reconnection. And people discovered that Dunge, who was the person who proposed this, okay, this is a very short paper. You will find it's a one and a half page paper only, and this is a complete basis of maximum energy of whole magnetosphere or processes getting through the reconnection. So only I have seen that's very small paper, but changed completely our understanding about how magnetosphere works. And look at this, the sun, then you have MF polarity. So similar reconnection happening on the sun. That's how the CMAs are ejected through the reconnection, and that's how the even this solar wind or CME magnetic field interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. So Earth's magnetic field points from south to the north pole. Okay, it goes like this, opposite direction. And when IMF, we call interplanetary magnetic field, is oppositely directed, then the reconnection takes place at the magnetopoles. And here, this magnetic field is reconnect, and solar wind is there, always flowing anti-sunward, this radially outward, right, direction. So these reconnected magnetic field lines are advected or transported towards the night. Once again, at the night side, magnetic field lines, see, this is a here region once again. Magnetic field lines are like this, oppositely directed towards left and towards right. Once again, in a right condition, reconnection takes place, and these magnetic field lines get reconnected and get transported toward day side. And that's how magnetosphere is conserved, or magnetic field is still there. Otherwise, if there is no night side reconnection, whole magnetosphere will erode in no time and will not left with the magnetosphere. So there is a somehow this balancing done, and this we call Dange cycle, and that's how we have reconnection and transport of magnetic field, magnetic solar wind energy to the magnetosphere. Not only that, so we know basic principle from physics, like solar winds is crossing these open magnetic field lines, polar magnetic field lines, and going to the night side. But when it's crossing, if you look at in a solar wind frame, you will be seeing the change in magnetic field line. So dou B by dou T, you have a rate of change of magnetic field line, and that gives you electric field. And this is the electric field which maps to the polar region, magnetosphere, polar region of the Earth, and causes a huge potential drop, few 20,000, 30,000, or 50,000 kilovolt across the polar cap on the Earth's magnetosphere, and that gives a lot of current systems, transient current system, or huge current system inside the magnetosphere. So we'll look at this as we go ahead, and this when these magnetosphere current systems are generated, we do see their disturbances in the magnetic field. So somehow, suppose you are at equator or in Mumbai as we are sitting, or Trivandrum I am here. So at equator, And if I take a magnetic field measurement, I will see sudden decrease in magnetic field in few hours and few days recovery times sometimes. And this sudden decrease in Earth's magnetic field is nothing but a geomagnetic storm are triggered by these coronal mass ejections or solar wind structure like co-rotating interaction region. They interact with Earth's magnetic field, they dump the energies, they generate the current system such that they are opposite to the magnet, their moment is opposite to the magnetic field of the Earth, and that's why we do see decrease in the magnetic field. And that's how we quantify them. Last May, almost more than a century, we can estimate this type of event, geomagnetic storm, by just measuring this magnetic field. And not only ICMEs, as I said, Sierra effect, their disturbances are different. Like ICMEs, you cause sudden decrease, but when you have a solar wind structures, correlating interaction region, you see slow decrease, very small amplitude, but the energy injected in the magnetosphere is more during these CIR storms, correlating interaction region, because they last many, many days, long recovery times. So they just continuously just keep injecting the energy in the Earth's magnetosphere and causing the disturbances. So both the structures are very important when you are looking at the Earth's environment and disturbances. People think only, okay, huge structure like CMEs are important. No, those are important, but even CIR, small structure, but which continuously inject energy to the magnetosphere are also important. So as I mentioned already, during the storms, various current systems are generated. So one is a ring current. So you can look at this. This is a like equatorial plane. We have magnetic field here, and this is complicated picture. I don't want to scare everybody, but it's just to get a glimpse how complicated is current structure. I just put it here. So we have a ring current going like this equatorial plane. We have a tail current. So tail is like there, then we have magnetopause current at the day side. So why this current? So one should understand a simple way. Um, if you deform the magnetic field, okay, if you have a deforms a dipole magnetic field, you can explain always with currents because magnetic field and currents are like same. I will say if there is a current, there is a magnetic field, and if there is a magnetic field, there is a current, and if there is a distortion in magnetic field, there is a some intensification or addition of some currents in the system. So all these weird shape of magnetosphere you can explain based on these different current structures, and that's how the currents are generated. And their directions, their coupling is complicated and still current issue of debate how they can current, where the this ring current get connected, whether those go to high latitude, whether it's connect to tail. This is still complicated issue. So the total this energy is coming from the solar wind. All these current systems are due to the solar wind, and that's how we, if you add up this energy, ring current and joule hitting, some particles like aurora, they are precipitating, right? Some particles are coming to auroral hover, means some particles from the sun are precipitating in the magnetosphere, and that is how they are causing particle precipitation. And these huge currents, even though it's an infinitely conducting magnetosphere, still there is a some finite conductivity. And once you have conductivity, that means there is a some resistance. And once you have a resistance, you have a joule heating. So some huge joule heating happening in high latitude currents, high latitude regions. And if you add all these currents, you'll find this is some fraction of solar wind, not completely. Okay, some fraction of the solar wind is only sufficient to current generate all these currents in the magnetosphere. So this is a ring current structure. You will see how it looks, and this is imaged by twin spacecraft. It's a like a nice equatorial donal shaped like structure we have, and it varies with time. It causes geometric storms, sometimes very weak, sometimes very intense, and that's how we understand the geometric storm just based on ring current at present. More complicated as we go ahead deep inside the magnetosphere. After Valorant when radiation well discovered, people were afraid. Oh my God, this is a huge radiation dose exists at these L shells or this 2 to 3 RE and 5 6 RE radius from the sun, Earth. Then how will go for space travel? So people were afraid, can we go there or not? So when you go to the moon, almost I think two-thirds of radiation is radiation dose is due to the radiation belt. the traverse. Fortunately, remember that we are not just going around the this radiation belt. If we spend many days in radiation belt, doomsday. It's a very hazardous. Fortunately, we just take one shot and go out of the radiation belt. Okay, for human it is not that dangerous then, but it could become dangerous sometime because this radiation belts composed of high energetic particles, MEV, mega electron volt energies, protons and electrons, and there are two radiation belts. One is like outer radiation belt and one is inner radiation belt. So inner radiation belt generally is not get affected because it's well within magnetosphere. So we don't see much changes always, but this outer radiation belt get always affected and it uh, continuously changes in minute time scales to solar cycle time scales. This is a very nice actual data plotted for zero point 0.6 MeV electrons from the Valonon radiation belt mission. At the right, you can see how this radiation field is mapped. So this is a big mission, like it did adventure going into the most hazardous environment, radiation belt, and mapping this mega radiation belt for the last 7 8 years. The mission has ended, and fortunately, I was working that time when it was ongoing, and now also so much data we are looking at it. So look at these plots. So this red things in last 2012 2014, just 2 years data, less than 2 years, and you'll see large variations in particle fluxes. L shell is nothing but radius from the surface of the Earth, around 6 solar Earth radii or 36,000 kilometers. So these fluxes are very dynamic, and when you go for very high energy 8.8 maybe, we don't see much variation. So there was a discovery. There were like third radiation belt also, which was in Nature published by Baker. So this is from same Baker paper, image taken from that, and these are very hazardous because these are hundreds of MEVs or 500 MEVs you do see particle fluxes. We should not be there at those locations to get affected. So this type of events are rare. They don't happen. Extreme events not today and tomorrow happening, but they do happen. Very rare. So last extreme event, which are the most extreme event in a history space physics history, was documented or recorded, was 1859 geomagnetic storm, and we should be proud of that because only record geomagnetic record we have in the world is from Mumbai or Bombay Kulaba Magnetic Observatory. Look at the strength of this storm. This goes around 1600 nanotesla around. It's a debatable number, but let's assume 1600 nanotesla decrease in magnetic field. So this happened in the daytime of the of in Indian region. That's why we didn't see the auroras. But if it could have been in the night time, Mumbai would have witnessed the aurora. But not this event. In the next event, which was also one of the extreme events, 1872 event also caused days auroras seen in Mumbai almost. So that latitude auroras reach. So such type of events can happen now also. That time as there were no like big electricity grid or no spacecraft in the space, no ISS is rotating or astronauts in the space. So we don't realize how damaging this was. But just visualize if this extreme event happens, what will happen, how disastrous it could be. So this is how just overview I'm planning to give you in few minutes, and I think I'm running out of time maybe. So space weather impacts. So as I mentioned, they cause satellite damages, then lot of induced currents in the ground also, or your pipelines or grid systems. In ionosphere also they cause currents and GPS installation. So they can affect our power grids. Look at this 1989 event. This is a transformer. Okay, what happened with the transformer? It is completely molten down almost due to the huge dB by dt or enhanced currents due to the sudden change in the magnetic field. So this is in 1989, and this storm was not even close to the Carrington event, which I showed you earlier. If that magnitude happens, I don't know how many transformers will be burned and completely shut down, and we'll have a blackout coming. So this one it's very challenging and very important to now understand how it affects the spacecraft, because that time we didn't have any spacecraft much. Now we have thousands, and not only thousands. With time will go, we'll have tens or few or million. I don't know what number it is going to, because there are nanosats, picosats, small satellites going. We are trying to send in the space, and with next few decades, we'll have whole space junk sitting in the space. And suppose that time we have huge events, they will going to cause a lot of surface charging to the spacecraft. Then the capacitor will be blown away. Then some data will be lost. Okay, not only that, the satellites will get affected because of huge drag. Okay, huge drag will be happening in the ionosphere region, because ionosphere get heated up, and more energy means more drag to the satellite. And instead of just look at this cartoon, the satellite before the geomagnetic storm or solar storm was going like this, and sudden there is a disturbance due to the drag, it started decaying. So a lot of satellites can get from out of the orbit, and suppose we don't have a boosting mechanism, we can lose them very fast, and their lifetime can decrease. So this is one of the study we did. Look at this. This was highlighted in some NASA um, uh, media. So we try to construct the historic storm impact. So suppose we have a few 500 nanotesla geomagnetic storm hitting the Earth, how much satellite drag we expect, and look at the satellite drag. So almost it's going few hundred meter just within a just few days or few hours of the geomagnetic storm. And without geomagnetic storm, it's just flat, it doesn't affect. So geomagnetic storm can deorbit your spacecrafts, and that's why we need to actually forecast them in prior, at least to understand what we can do, or small precautionary measure. We cannot stop the geomagnetic storm or solar storm. At present, we don't have that technology. Future we may, but at present we are not capable of that. So at least we can minimize our losses. We cannot stop completely, but just minimize it. So this is impact on navigation as day-to-day life. As these disturbances not only affect magnetosphere, we have 100 kilometer and above, few hundred kilometer ionosphere, and that's ionized plasma once again. So this geomagnetic storms and solar flares, ACPs, they cause huge ionization there and huge uplifting of plasma, which can cause high density plasma bubbles in the ionosphere, and they degrades the GPS signal reaching to the ships, or you are on the road, you are driving the car, and suddenly your accuracy is gone haywire. So just think that impact, what type of impact it can cause. So huge field is here to try to forecast how much disturbances are there and minimize this error in GPS location. So you can get off by many meters if this type of disturbances come there. Not only that, so why we should worry is more like concerning now, uh, like even climate change, like solar activity. We are just observing last 100, or let's say 400 years since Galileo started looking at sunspots. But sun is there 4.5 billion years, and we are trying to make some sense of how is the sun going to behave in future by just looking at 400 years data. That is just sunspot data. And if you look at the spacecraft data, that just lasts for a few decades. So just few decades, we are trying to understand what sun is going to do, which is very challenging task, and that's why we are not that good at predicting how it is, when it is going to have a big extreme event, and even how it is going to affect the Earth. So, but long-term variation, people have looked at some long variation data, and they have found that the cloud cover get affected by the solar activity, because it's an indirect link somehow. Like solar wind, fast solar wind doesn't allow these galactic high energetic particles to enter in the solar system, and it decreases the flux. But when solar activity is low, we have a huge flux of these cosmic rays coming to the Earth. And these cosmic rays interact with the Earth's atmosphere. They causes some ionization, which provide the seed for nucleation of the clouds, and so clouds can grow. And then there is a huge feedback mechanism of clouds and climate. It can be positively depending upon the cloud where it is happening, and it can affect your climate. It can warm the climate, or even sometimes it decrease depending on the clouds. So this is still current active research and not yet well established how it is linked. But okay, at least we know that there is a high possibility the solar activity is going to drives the long-term variation of climate. Even we are adding on that, that we very well know because we are adding a lot of pollution, CO2, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So that's why it becomes very important to forecast it. And there are a lot of variety ways of forecast, like empirical relationships. You can study the data and try to build some relationships. Then there are very physics-based model. We simulate like on based on basic physics, like that we can simulate here. Look at the simulations of magnetosphere, how they affect, or space weather impacts we can simulate, and extreme events we can simulate. And there are some studies which try to estimate simulation, uh, how it will affect our navigation. And there are now new comings like machine learning. Initially that was not welcomed by community, but now it is getting better and better in time because there is huge data, and there is will be a time coming where scientists will not able to really touch this data, and machine learning type of stuff will really be helpful to even derive new physical laws from the data or mine the physics from the data. So those efforts are just beginning now. It's just dawn of this machine learning, I will say. So we want to simulate and forecast solar activity because that's going to drive our disturbance in geomagnetic field. So this is a like a current forecast for geomagnetic or solar cycle 25. Look at this solar cycle or solar activity. More the number means high activity. Low means low solar sunspot number is low activity. So it goes up and low. 11-year solar cycle nicely seen. And there is an interesting trend. Last many cycles, the solar activity peak is decreasing and decreasing. So people have forecasted almost smaller amplitude. Some are predicting higher. Let's watch and wait what happens with sun in next few years. But suppose it next solar activity become low, we are in trouble. We may be heading to the ice age scenario, which happened in a few hundred years like back, modern minimum we call. So the sun, there were like many years, no sunspot, almost no activity on the sun, which is bad. Like we may go into the ice age. I don't know how it interacts with like our greenhouse gases and ice age, or compensate or add on. We need to, it's a more complex problem to give a really direct answer for that. And more interesting, I want to add our component like India. Even we can contribute, or we are contributing in the space weather forecasting and modeling scenarios. So this is a image actually constructed by using radio, OT radio telescope by using scintillation data. So you can see nice flux rope structure. So we can study these interplanetary disturbances coming from space to us by using the scintillation, their size and the speed we can derive. So this is one of the unique facility in the world we have. It is upgraded now, so it has become much better than previous. Uh, and we should be proud of that. So whole international community is looking forward to use this facility for space weather forecasting. So we have some even for monitoring and forecasting some data set which are spacecraft in the space and looking from the sun right to the left sun emission. We can image where they are and how they are traveling, not continuously, but most of the time we can look at. But we need to have more information of magnetic field which we are missing. So we cannot exactly quantify how they interact with the Earth's magnetic field and impact. So that is still we need to do. And here's a huge physics system observatory. We have plenty of spacecraft, but compared to the volume of the space, these are very small and tiny, you can understand. So volume is huge space on Sun Earth. So this is a huge space and we have tiny measurements. Even we look numerous, many spacecraft, but they are very tiny. And we are just measuring a small part of it. And we are trying to infer the whole magnetosphere or whole interplanetary space, how it interacts or how it is going to respond. So we have very recent mission Parker Solar Probe, which is actually touching the sun, we can say practically touching the sun, very closest to the sun. Look at the adventure we have humanity done. We are going so close, we never imagined. So I was fortunate to see this probe myself because that was built in same Godas GSFC, Goda Space Flight Center, and it was just ready to launch that time. And it is not very big; it's just few meter in size. But look at that; it's surviving extreme heat and measuring first time stuff, many things. We don't know. Lot of exciting results from that we have seen now coming, and understanding about origin of solar wind, how the solar wind at a different radial distance is there, how the interplanetary magnetic field is there. Very astonishing and puzzling things have come out from this, and still it is doing. So I will go to the Indian contribution. So this is Aditya mission, Aditya 1 mission. We have, this is the first, I think, space weather satellite or space mission we have, which is going to exclusively study the sun, and even we can use it as a space weather monitor with the given conditions. So it has a nice payloads. It will be looking at the sun continuously. The CMEs, whatever movies we saw, we can see from our own spacecraft, and it will do better job. I think it has a better measurements for the solar coronal emissions. Plus, it has a particle instruments. This Aditya aspects from PRL Physical Research Laboratory, then PAPA Plasma Analyzer package for Aditya PAPA, which is same institute where I'm working, which is just almost ready. I can see, I'm seeing that every day almost, you can say. This and magnetometer. This was added later. Initially, it was not there, but this was very essential. Otherwise, how will know what polarity of magnetic field is hitting the Earth? So this is an interesting instrument, very small instrument, but very powerful. So we'll understand what is the polarity of magnetic field, and we can predict its impact. So we have also network, ground network, not only in space. We have a ground magnetometer network all over the globe, which are looking at this space weather events and measuring. And look at this, like Alibag Kulaba Observatory, more than 175 years now almost. This continuous, it's a unique observatory in the world almost, which has a continuous measurements of geomagnetic disturbances. And we have many magnetometers in India which are measuring from and studying low to little mid latitude, low latitude region magnetic field variation and ionospheric studies. So we have immense data on ground magnetometer. Even as a we are greedy scientists, we want measurements everywhere. So we even want measurement in the ocean. So we'll say, okay, we have ground, but ocean we are missing. So we don't understand still a lot of things. But it's difficult. But then we have a spacecraft measurement which complement each other, and we're trying to make sense what is happening in the space. So what we do, like suppose we have a lot of extreme event sitting and we have ground magnetometer, we have space observation. So can we do something to predict, or can we do with this measurement? So only thing we can do is that use the data, simulations and measurements to try to forecast, maybe crude forecast, okay, what when the event will happen, and then next try to quantify the impact on the Earth's environment, because that is also important, whether it's extreme or not. Else you will get everyday false alarm and you'll just keep shutting down your systems like satellites or power grid. That is not feasible. So we need to have accurate modeling, develop that. Then more space measurement definitely we need. Then we need to build a radiation hardened hardware which can withstand like this uh, huge extreme events. If they happen, we need to see whether Parker solar probe will withstand. Suppose some huge CME or some extreme event happens, and it is just going near to that. You need to look at that also. Then our this Faraday cages we can build, or some more electronics development we need to do to protect our transformers, so that suppose huge sudden changes of this magnetic geomagnetic field can be filtered out and transformer can still sustain without any damage. So like this simple stuff we are trying to do, and whole global communities, space community coming with the plan, working plan for that. Even USA has listed one of the most devastating or dangerous for space weather extreme events are dangerous for humanity, and like asteroids like that, asteroid impact, this is also a huge impact. So they are also allocated a lot of policies and funds to predict it better way. So more to do in space weather still, because initially people didn't realize how important it is. Now with time we have realized this is directly relevant to the society and present technology. So more missions, more measurements, more modeling studies, mm, and more ground observation studies. That's the way to go for the mitigation policies. And that's what I have to say. Thank you here. I stop my presentation.